I need you to listen to the last words ever transmitted from the Bourbon Rhode before she sank into the Atlantic Ocean. We have no more engine. They are all down. All crew muster, ready and on standby. Life rafts, not possible to launch. Very rough seas. Swell 30 feet or more. September 26th, 2019. 9:45 a.m. 14 men are trapped on a sinking vessel in the middle of Hurricane Lorenzo. A Category 4 monster, with 127 mile-per-hour winds. They're 1,200 nautical miles from land. That's 1,380 miles. The nearest rescue is 2 days away. But here is what is going to haunt you. Those 14 men knew the ship was broken before they left port. The chief engineer told the captain the vessel wasn't ready for the voyage. The first officer quit because of how bad the conditions were. Multiple crew members complained about leaking hatches, faulty systems, repairs that were never completed, and the company sent them into the Atlantic Ocean anyway. Within hours, the Bourbon Rhode would capsize. 3 men would be pulled from a life raft after 2 days drifting in the open ocean. 4 bodies would be recovered, and 7 souls, they were never found. But this isn't a story about a hurricane. This is a story about corporate negligence. This is a story about a company that valued a contract in Guyana more than 14 human lives. This is a story about what happens when profit matters more than safety. So before we go any further, I want you to ask yourself this question. If your employer told you to take a broken vehicle on a dangerous journey, and you knew it wasn't safe, would you go? Would you risk your life for a paycheck? Because that's exactly the choice these men faced, and 11 of them paid the ultimate price. Let me introduce you to the Bourbon Rhode, a 70-meter anchor-handling tug supply vessel. If you don't work offshore, you might not know what that means. These vessels are the workhorses of the oil and gas industry. They position drilling rigs. They tow equipment. They supply platforms with everything from food to fuel. The Bourbon Rhode was built in 2002. For 12 years, she operated off the coast of Nigeria. 12 years of harsh conditions, heavy seas, constant work. She was reliable. She was profitable. She made money for Bourbon Offshore, French maritime company with hundreds of vessels worldwide. Now, quick question for you. If you owned a car that had been working hard for 12 years, and you wanted to send it on a 3,000-mile road trip across a mountain range, what would you do first? You'd get it serviced, right? You'd check the brakes, the tires, the engine. You'd make sure everything was in perfect working order before you risked that journey. Well, Bourbon Offshore had the same idea. In July 2019, they sent the Bourbon Rhode to a shipyard in Las Palmas, Spain, for a 6-week reef. The vessel was transitioning from Nigerian waters to a new contract in Guyana journey that would take her across the entire Atlantic Ocean during hurricane season. 6 weeks to make sure she was ready. 6 weeks to fix everything that needed fixing. 6 weeks to ensure that 14 men would be safe on that crossing. But here's where the story starts to go wrong. On March 8th, 2019, 4 months before the shipyard period, a technical inspection of the Bourbon Rhode identified critical safety issues. Let me read you directly from the official investigation report. The inspector recommended new Balaudics inspection covers for the watertight compartments. The existing covers were leaking. The bolt holes needed to be and the inspector included photos with a caption that should terrify you. Shark jaw, compartment leaking cover, leaking covers on watertight compartments. Do you understand what that means? Watertight compartments are supposed to keep water out. That's literally their entire purpose. If they're leaking, the vessel can flood. If the vessel floods in the middle of the ocean, people die. So let me ask you, if an inspector told you that your boat had leaking watertight covers, would you fix them immediately? Schedule repairs as soon as possible, ignore the problem and hope for the best, or send the boat across the Atlantic Ocean? Comment your answer below, because you're not going to believe what Bourbon Offshore chose. The vessel entered the Las Palmas shipyard on July 15th, 2019. 6 weeks, plenty of time to address every issue. Right? Wrong? Wrong. According to the Luxembourg Flag State Investigate, I am quoting directly here. Some of the work that was intended to be done at the shipyard was not performed due to missing materials or tools. Missing materials? Missing tools. in a professional shipyard. For a vessel about to cross an ocean, but it gets worse. Let me tell you about the people who started noticing these problems. The originally hired first officer, an experienced maritime professional who had seen the vessel's condition. He walked away from the job because he didn't think the ship was safe. His replacement also complained about the overall condition of the vessel. The chief engineer, the person responsible for keeping the engines and systems running, reported to the captain before departure that the vessel was not fully ready for the intended voyage due to pending repairs and maintenance. Read that again. Not fully ready. Pending repairs. The chief engineer, the person who knows every bolt and wire on that vessel, said it wasn't ready. And you know what happened? The company sent them anyway. September 17th, 2019, the Bourbon Rhode departed Las Palmas, bound for Georgetown, Guyana. On board, 13 crew members plus one fifth-hour maintenance worker who D-Bin brought along specifically to complete steelworks that had not been finished at the shipyard. They brought a fitter along to finish repairs while crossing the ocean because the shipyard had UN completed the work. Does that sound safe to you? Does that sound like a company that cares about its crew? If you're as shocked by this as I am, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what I'm about to show you next about maritime industry negligence will blow your mind. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. 14 men, most of them Filipino crew, experienced maritime professionals who'd spent their lives at sea. Men with families back home. Men who trusted that their employer wouldn't send them to sea in an unseaworthy vessel. Among them, the captain, who'd been told by his chief engineer that the ship wasn't ready. The replacement first officer, who'd complained about the conditions but stayed anyway because he needed the job. The fitter, who thought he'd have a few weeks to complete repairs while they made their way across the Atlantic. These men knew something was wrong. But when your employer tells you to sail, when your contract depends on it, when you've got a family depending on your paycheck, what choice do you really have? For 9 days, the Bourbon Rhode made her way west across the Atlantic. 9 days of normal operations. 9 days closer to Guyana. 9 days during which the crew was probably thinking, maybe it'll be okay. Maybe we'll make it. But 1,200 nautical miles off the coast of Martinique, something was building in the Atlantic that would test every weakness, every unfinished repair, every leaking hatch on that vessel, Hurricane Lorenzo. One of the strongest Atlantic hurricanes ever recorded so far east, Category 4. Sustained winds of 127 miles per hour, gusts up to 160 miles per hour, waves reaching 40 feet, and the Bourbon Rhode was sailing directly toward it. Now before we continue, I need you to answer this honestly. If you were the captain of that vessel and you saw Category 4 hurricane on your weather radar, would you alter course to avoid it, turn back, or keep going on your planned route? What would you do? Comment below. Because the decision the captain made is going to shock you. September 17th to September 25th. 9 days of transit. The Bourbon Rhode is making roughly 10 knots, steadily working her way across the Atlantic. The crew has fallen into the rhythm of life at sea-watch rotations, maintenance duties, meals in the galley, sleep in cramped bunks. But problems are already showing themselves, according to the 3 survivors who would later testify. The bilge alarm system was faulty. Bilge alarms are critical safety systems. They warn you when water is accumulating in the bottom of the vessel. If you don't know water's coming in, you can't pump it out. And if you can't pump it out, the survivors said this had been a problem for a long time, even during the vessel's previous service off Nigeria. The bilge alarms were unreliable. The crew had learned to work around it, to manually check the bilges, to assume the alarms might not work when needed. Think about that for a second. Imagine driving a car where the check engine light doesn't work. You're just hoping that nothing goes wrong, because you won't have any warning until it's too late. The engine room skylight hatching, another critical component, hadn't been repaired during the shipyard period. Crew members reported that water was leaking through this hatch into the engine room. The fitter who'd been brought along managed to mostly fix it while underway, but small drops of water were still coming through. Small drops in calm seas. That's annoying. In a hurricane, that's deadly. September 23rd. Hurricane Lorenzo forms off the coast of West Africa. Within 24 hours, it explodes into a Category 2 hurricane. By September 25th, It's a Category 4 monster, the strongest hurricane on record so far east in the Atlantic tropics. And the Bourbon Rhode, still 1,200 nautical miles from Martinique, is right in its path. Here's what I need you to understand. Ships have sophisticated weather routing systems. They have satellite communications. They can see hurricanes coming from hundreds of miles away. Modern maritime navigation has access to the same weather data that meteorologists use to forecast storms days in advance. The Bourbon Rhode's crew, KNEW, Hurricane Lorenzo, was there. They could see it. They could track it. They knew its strength, its projected path, its wind speeds. And according to the official investigation, the vessel did not alter course. The Bourbon Rhode continued on her planned route. She was on track to pass through the hurricane's northern quadrants, within 35 nautical miles of the epicenter. 35 miles from the eye of a Category 4 hurricane. Now, I want you to really think about this. Why would a captain make that decision? Why would you sail toward a hurricane instead of around it? Here are the possibilities. Pressure from the company to stay on schedule. Fuel concerns. Detouring adds distance and burns more fuel. Overconfidence in the vessel's ability to handle the conditions. Or not fully understanding how severe the hurricane was. What do you think was the reason? Because the answer to that question determines whether this was an accident or corporate manslaughter. Let me paint you a picture of what Hurricane Lorenzo looked like from space. Satellite imagery showed a perfectly formed hurricane with a distinct eye. Spiral rain bands extending hundreds of miles, and a wind field so massive it was generating 40-foot swells across thousands of square miles of ocean. The National Hurricane Center was issuing warnings. No AA was tracking it. Every maritime weather service in the Atlantic was screaming, "Stay away from this storm." But the Bourbon Rhode kept sailing. Closer. And closer. And closer. September 25th. Evening. The outer rain bands start to hit. Wind speeds increase. Seas build from 6 feet to 10 feet to 15 feet. The vessel starts pitching and rolling. Water washes across the deck, and somewhere below decks, in the shark jaw compartments at the stern, water starts to seep through those inspection covers that were never properly repaired. September 26th. 600 hours. 6 in the morning. A crew member checking the aft compartments notices something wrong. Water. Not just a little water flooding. The Z-drive compartment, which houses critical propulsion equipment, is taking on water through the inspection covers for the shark jaw housing frame. Remember those leaking covers from the March inspection? The ones that should have been fixed in the shipyard. The ones that were supposedly addressed but maybe weren't done properly. They're failing in the middle of a hurricane, 1,000 miles from land. The crew tries to stop the leak. The fitter, the maintenance guy, who was brought along to finish repairs, manages to stop the water at one of the inspection covers, but not the other. Water keeps pouring in. Bio 615 just 15 minutes later. The flooding has reached the bottom coaming of the bulkhead hatch. That's maritime terminology for the raised edge at the bottom of a doorway. If water reaches that level, it means the compartment is seriously flooded. And more importantly, it's threatening to spill over into adjacent compartments. Worse, the electrical controls for propulsion and steering are in that compartment. If water reaches those controls, they short out. And if they short out, the ship becomes uncontrollable in the middle of a hurricane with 40-foot waves and 127 mile/hour winds. Meanwhile, water is also washing into the engine room through the skylight hatchta, one that was never properly repaired, the one that had been mostly fixed but still had small leaks. In calm, say small leaks don't matter. In Hurricane, with waves crashing over the deck, water pours through that hatch like a waterfall. 734 hours. The Bourbon Rhode loses steering. Then, propulsion. The engines are still running, but the vessel can't be controlled. She's adrift, at the mercy of Hurricane Lorenzo. Imagine being on that vessel. You're in your bunk, or at your station. Suddenly, the entire ship goes quiet. The engine noise you've gotten used to, the vibration of the propellers, all of it stops. The vessel starts rolling violently because there's no power to stabilize her. You know what that means? You're a professional mariner. You've trained for this, but knowing it and experiencing it are two very different things. 750 hours. The captain activates the GMDSS distress signal, the Global Maritime Distress and Safety System. It has an automated emergency beacon that alerts rescue coordination centers and nearby vessels that you're in trouble. 805 hours. The crew activates the superb emergency position indicating radio beacon. This device sends out your exact GPS coordinates to search and rescue satellites. But here's the reality. They're 1,200 nautical miles from Martinique. That's the closest land. The nearest rescue vessels are days away, and they're in the middle of a category for hurricane. Help is not coming anytime soon. Put yourself in that position for a moment. You're on a vessel that's flooding, losing power, being battered by a hurricane. You've sent distress signals, but you know rescue is days away. What's going through your mind? Are you praying? Are you thinking about your family? Are you preparing to abandon ship? Are you angry at the company that sent you here in a broken vessel? Comment below what you would be feeling. Because 14 men experienced exactly that terror. 845 hours. The captain sends a message to Bourbon Offshore's home office. Let me read you the exact words. The vessel has flooding in the engine room and is likely going down. Likely going down. Not we're in trouble. Not we need assistance. Going down. The captain knows. His crew knows. In that moment, everyone aboard the Bourbon Rhode understands that their vessel is sinking. The crew musters. That means everyone assembles at their designated emergency station, usually on deck, with their survival suits and life jackets. This is the procedure you've drilled 100 times. You know exactly where to go, what to grab, what to do. The drills happen in calm weather. This is a hurricane, 945 hours. The captain sends his final message. We have no more engine. They are all down. All crew muster. Ready and on standby. Life rafts. Not possible to launch. Very rough seas. Swell 30 feet or more. Life rafts. Not possible. 2. Launch. Do you understand what that means? Life rafts are your last resort. They're how you survive when the ship goes down. They're enclosed, they have emergency supplies, they have radio beacons. They're designed to keep you alive until rescue arrives. And the captain is saying they can't launch them because the seas are too rough. Picture this scene. 14 men in survival suits huddled on the deck of a sinking vessel. Waves washing over them, wind screaming. The ship rolling so violently that launching life rafts would send them crashing into the vessel's hull, or flipping over immediately. They're trapped. Their ship is going down, and their survival equipment is useless. Before I continue with what happened next, I need you to do something for me. If this story is making you realize just how dangerous maritime work really is, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because I am exposing maritime tragedies that companies do want you to know about, and you need to see what I've got coming next week. What would you do in that situation? You're on a sinking ship. Life rafts can't be launched. You're wearing a survival suit, but jumping into 30-foot seas and hurricane winds is almost certain death. Do you stay with the ship and hope it stays afloat long enough for conditions to improve? Jump and take your chances in the water. Or keep trying to launch the life rafts, even though it's dangerous. This isn't hypothetical. 14 men had to make this exact decision, and their choice would determine who lived and who died. 1,243 hours, 12:43 p.m. The Bourbon Rhode's last eyes position report is received. AIS automatic identification. System continuously broadcasts a vessel's position, speed, and course. When ICE stops transmitting, it usually means one of two things. Either the vessel's electrical system has completely failed, or the vessel is sunk. Somewhere between 0945 and 1243, a 3-hour window, the Bourbon Rhode capsized and sank. We don't know the exact moment. We don't know if it was sudden or gradual. We don't know if the crew had warning or if it happened in an instant. What we do know is this. At some point during those 3 hours, 14 men ended up in the Atlantic Ocean in the middle of Hurricane Lorenzo. The Marine Rescue Coordination Center in Martinique, immediately issued a call for assistance. Any vessel in the area was asked to divert and search for survivors. This is standard maritime protocol when a ship goes down. Everyone nearby drops what they're doing and comes to help. But remember, 1,200 nautical miles from Martinique. In a hurricane, the nearest merchant vessels were still hundreds of miles away. 2 bulkers cargo ships responded to the call, the SSI Excellent and the Pied. These are massive vessels, hundreds of feet long, thousands of tons. Not designed for search and rescue, not equipped with fast boats or rescue equipment, but they're what's available. They turned toward the last known position of the Bourbon Rhode and pushed their engines to maximum speed. But massive cargo ships don't move fast, and they're fighting against hurricane-force winds and enormous seas. Meanwhile, somewhere in the Atlantic, at least 3 men managed to get into a life raft. We don't know how. Maybe conditions improved just enough. Maybe they took the risk and launched despite the danger. Maybe pure luck and adrenaline got them into that raft alive, but they made it. 3 men in an inflatable life raft in the middle of the ocean, surrounded by 30-foot waves in the aftermath of a hurricane. Have you ever been seasick? Like, really seasick, where the motion makes you so nauseous you can barely function. Now imagine that times 1,000. Imagine being in a small rubber raft, being thrown up and down 30-foot swells every few seconds. You're soaking wet. You're cold. You're terrified. You're watching the horizon for any sign of rescue, but all you see is water and more water and more water. And you know that somewhere out there, your crewmates are either in the water or already gone. September 26th, Passaz night falls. The 3 men in the life raft are still alive, but they're in darkness now. No lights, except maybe a small emergency beacon. The sound of wind and waves. The constant motion that never stops. September 27th. Dawn breaks. They've survived the night, but rescue still hasn't arrived. The ocean is slightly calmer, the hurricane has moved on, but they're still in rough seas, still drifting, still hoping. Hours pass. The sun rises higher. Hope starts to fade. How long can they survive out here? How long before dehydration or hypothermia or sheer exhaustion takes them? September 28th afternoon. Nearly 2 days after the Bourbon Rhode sank, the crew of the Pied, one of the responding cargo ship, spots something, a life raft. With movement inside, the Pied's crew deploys their rescue equipment. They carefully maneuver their massive ship alongside the tiny life raft. They throw lines, they lower ladders, and slowly, carefully, they pull 3 men from that raft. 3 survivors. Out of 14, 3 men who spent 2 days in a life raft in the Atlantic Ocean, watching the horizon, wondering if anyone was coming, wondering if they were the only ones left alive. But the search wasn't over. Because if 3 men survived in a life raft, maybe others had too. Maybe there were more life rafts out there. Maybe more survivors were waiting to be found. Search aircraft were deployed. Additional ships joined the effort. The Coast Guard, International Rescue Services, commercial vessels, everyone was searching the area where the Bourbon Rhode went down. Over the next several days, 4 bodies were recovered from the ocean. For crew members who didn't make it into life rafts, or who didn't survive in the water, or who were swept away before rescue arrived. 4 families would get their loved ones back. They could have funerals. They could say goodbye. They could begin the impossible process of grieving. But 7 crew members were never found. 7 families never got that closure. 7 bodies, somewhere in the Atlantic, claimed by the sea. I want you to think about this. Which would be worse, getting your loved one's body back and having to face that reality, or never finding them and always wondering if maybe, somehow, they survived? Comment your thoughts. Because this is the impossible choice 7 families had to live with. November 2019. 2 months after the disaster, Luxembourg, the Bourbon Rhode's flag state launches an official investigation into the sinking. Flag states are responsible for investigating maritime accidents involving vessels registered under their flag. The investigation team interviews the 3 survivors. They examine the vessel's maintenance records. They review the inspection reports. They contact former crew members who'd served on the Bourbon Rhode before her final voyage, and what they discover is going to make you furious. Let me read you directly from Luxembourg's interim investigation report. These are official findings, not speculation. The originally hired first officer left the shipyard due to the poor condition of the ship. His replacement also complained about the overall condition of the ship. 2 different first officers. Both complained about the ship's condition. One quit over it. All 3 survivors said they were surprised by the poor condition. One survivor stated that a senior member of the engine crew was concerned that the technical condition of the ship would not allow it to cross the Atlantic. The chief engineer, the person who knows every system on that vessel, did UNT think the ship could safely cross the Atlantic. And they sent it anyway. How does that make you feel? Seriously, I want you to comment your reaction, because this isn't an accident. This isn't bad luck. This is corporate negligence that killed 11 people. The investigation revealed the complete timeline of failures. March 2019. Technical inspection identifies leaking covers on watertight compartments. Repair recommended. July-August 2019. Vessel enters shipyard for 6-week refit. Some repairs not completed due to missing materials or tools. September 17th, 2019. Chief engineer tells captain vessel isn't ready. They depart anyway. September 26th, 2019. Leaking compartments fail under hurricane conditions. 11 people die. Do you see the pattern? Every single step of the way, there were warnings. There were opportunities to fix the problems. There were people saying this isn't safe. And at every single step, the company chose to ignore those warnings. The investigation determined that flooding began in the Z-drive compartment through the inspection covers for the shark jaw housing frame exactly the components that had been flagged in the March inspection. The fitter managed to stop one leak, but not the other. Water continued pouring in. When it reached the electrical controls, the vessel lost steering and propulsion. Meanwhile, water was also entering through the engine room skylight, hatch another component that had even been properly repaired during the shipyard period. 2 different entry points. Both identified before the voyage, both supposedly addressed during the shipyard period. Both failed under hurricane conditions. That's not coincidence. That's systematic failure. But here is what really exposes Bourbon Offshore's negligence. Remember how I mentioned the vessel's manager appears to have concluded that the inspection report referred to optional removable covers, not the critical watertight inspection covers. They misread the inspection report, or they chose to misinterpret it, or they deliberately ignored it because fixing it properly would cost money and delay the vessel. Whatever the reason, that misunderstanding killed 11 people. Here is what I want you to consider. If a mechanic tells you your car's brakes are failing, and you misunderstand and don't fix them, and then someone dies in an accident, are you responsible? Comment your answer, because that's exactly what happened here. The investigation also revealed that the bilge alarm system, which would have given early warning of flooding, was notoriously unreliable. Former crew members testified that it had been malfunctioning for a long time during the vessel's previous service off Nigeria. So, not only did the vessel have leaking hatches, it also had a faulty warning system that might not alert the crew to flooding until it was too late. It's like having a smoke detector that only works sometimes. And when your house catches fire, you don't find out until the flames are already consuming the walls. But the investigation also examined another critical question. Why did the Bourbon Rhode sail so close to Hurricane Lorenzo? According to the findings, the vessel did not alter course despite having weather information showing the hurricane's strength and projected path. Why? Investigators found no clear answer. Was it pressure from the company to maintain schedule? Was it overconfidence? Was it a catastrophic error in judgment? We don't know. The captain died in the sinking, so we can't ask him. But what we do know is that modern weather routing technology could have guided the vessel around the hurricane with maybe an extra day or two of transit time. An extra day or two. That's what it would have cost to avoid Hurricane Lorenzo, and the company or the captain or both decided that extra time wasn't worth it. 11 lives for 1 or 2 days of schedule. If you were a company executive, and you knew that delaying a vessel by 2 days would save lives, would you do it? Or would you prioritize the contract, the schedule, the profits? I think most of you would choose lives. But clearly, someone at Bourbon Offshore made a different calculation. The three men who survived 2 days in a life raft in the Atlantic Ocean carried more than just trauma when they were rescued. They carried the truth about what really happened aboard the Bourbon Rhode. Their names haven't been widely publicized. Maritime law protects survivors' privacy during investigations, but what they testified to changed everything about how we understand this disaster. One survivor told investigators he was surprised by the poor condition of the vessel. This was an experienced mariner, someone who'd worked on offshore vessels for years, someone who knew what proper maintenance looked like, and he was surprised by how bad the Bourbon Rhode was. Another survivor described the bilge alarm system failures, how the crew had learned not to trust it, how they had to manually check the bilges because the automated warnings didn't work reliably. The third survivor provided details about the flooding sequence, how it started in the Z-drive compartment, how the fitter tried to stop it, how water kept coming in no matter what they did. If stories like this make you realize how much maritime workers how often companies fail them, you need to subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that bell icon too, because next week I'm exposing another maritime disaster where the company knew the vessel was unsafe and sent workers out anyway. You won't want to miss it. I want you to imagine surviving what these men survived. 2 days in a life raft, watching the ocean for rescue, not knowing if your crewmates were alive or dead, dealing with dehydration, hypothermia, seasickness, fear, exhaustion, all while wondering if rescue would ever come. And then, after you're rescued, after you've barely processed the trauma, you have to testify. You have to relive every moment. You have to explain to investigators exactly how your crewmates died. You have to tell families why their loved ones didn't make it. That's the burden these three survivors carry. Survivor's guilt is a very real psychological phenomenon. These men survived when 11 of their crewmates didn't. And they'll spend the rest of their lives asking, why me? Why did I make it when they didn't? But their testimony was crucial. Without their first-hand accounts, investigators might never have understood the full scope of Bourbon Offshore's negligence. Without their courage to speak truth to power, this disaster might have been written off as just another tragic accident at sea. These three survivors exposed the truth. The Bourbon Rhode was not seaworthy. The company knew it. The crew knew it, and they sailed anyway. One survivor reported that the chief engineer had expressed concern before departure that the vessel could unsafely cross the Atlantic. Think about the weight of that statement. The chief engineer, the person most qualified to assess the vessel's mechanical condition, said it wasn't safe. And what happened? Did the company delay departure to complete repairs? Did they send the vessel back to the shipyard? Did they listen to their own expert? No. They sent 14 men into the Atlantic in a broken ship during hurricane season. Another survivor described how the fitter was working on repairs while the vessel was underway. This wasn't scheduled maintenance. This was finishing work that should have been completed before departure. Work that was so critical, they brought an extra person along specifically to do it. That tells you everything you need to know about Bourbon Offshore's priorities. Get the vessel to Guyana. Meet the contract deadline. Make the money. Worry about safety later. Except later never came for 11 men. The survivors also testified about the moment they realized the vessel was going down. The panic. The desperate attempts to launch life rafts in impossible conditions. The decision about whether to stay with the ship or risk the water. Some chose one option. Some chose another. And that choice determined who lived and who died. One survivor described being in the water, being tossed by waves, struggling to reach a life raft. The physical exertion required just to survive, minute by minute. The mental battle against despair as hours turned into days without rescue. These men didn't just survive a sinking. They survived 2 days of physical and psychological torture in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And then they had the courage to tell their story so that maybe, just maybe, this would untap into someone else. But here's what haunts me. Despite their testimony, despite the investigation findings, despite the clear evidence of corporate negligence, what actually changed? Let's talk about accountability, or rather, the complete lack of it. 7 crew members were never found. 7 families who never got closure, never got to say goodbye, never got to bury their loved ones. The Bourbon Rhode disaster left behind 14 grieving families. Some got bodies back, some didn't. but all of them got the same thing from Bourbon Offshore. Silence. No public apology. No admission of fault. No promise to change procedures. Just legal teams and liability disclaimers and corporate doublespeak about unfortunate maritime incidents. 11 men died because a company chose profit over safety. And what consequences did that company face? The investigation report detailed the failures. The evidence was clear. The timeline was damning. Every step showed negligence. But in the world of international maritime law, proving criminal negligence is incredibly difficult. Bourbon Offshore was based in France. The vessel was flagged in Luxembourg. The crew members were from multiple countries. The sinking happened in international waters. So who has jurisdiction? Who files charges? Who holds the company accountable? The answer, too often, is no one. The families organized. They demanded answers. They pushed for criminal investigations. Some filed civil lawsuits seeking damages for wrongful death. But maritime law is complex. And companies like Bourbon Offshore have armies of lawyers whose entire job is to minimize liability and drag out legal proceedings until families give up or settle for pennies. This is the pattern in the maritime industry. When disasters happen, companies express sympathy. They cooperate with investigations. They promise to review procedures. But actual accountability, criminal charges, executives going to jail for sending men to sea in unseaworthy vessels, it almost never happens. And the families of the Bourbon Rhode victims are left with photos and memories and empty chairs at dinner tables and the knowledge that their loved ones died for a company's bottom line. One family member said in an interview, "They knew the ship wasn't safe. They sent them anyway." How is that not murder? It's a good question. If you knowingly send someone into a dangerous situation with inadequate safety equipment and they die, how is that different from killing them yourself? But maritime law doesn't see it that way. There are regulations, yes. Safety standards, yes. But enforcement is weak. Penalties are minimal, and companies can usually afford to pay fines that amount to a fraction of their annual profits. So the Bourbon Rhode sinks. 11 people die. An investigation confirms negligence, and life goes on for Bourbon Offshore. Except it didn't quite go on normally for the company. In 2020, just 1 year after the Bourbon Rhode disaster, Bourbon Offshore filed for bankruptcy. The company had been struggling financially for years, and multiple maritime incidents hadn't helped. Does that feel like justice to you? The company that sent 14 men to sea in an unseaworthy vessel doesn't face criminal charges. Instead, it declares bankruptcy, and potentially continues operations under a different name or ownership structure. The families get nothing except the bitter knowledge that their loved ones' deaths contributed to a company's financial collapse, but not to any real accountability. 7 crew members are still out there somewhere in the Atlantic. Their families don't have graves to visit. They don't have closure. They have only the ocean past, indifferent, keeping its secrets. Some families held memorial services at sea, scattering flowers over the water where they believed their loved ones might have gone down. But it's not the same as burial. It's not the same as knowing. And every time a new maritime disaster makes the news, these families relive that trauma. They see other families going through what they went through. They see the same patterns of corporate negligence, inadequate investigations, and lack of accountability. And they wonder, when will it stop? How many more people have to die before the industry changes? How many more families have to suffer before maritime companies start valuing human lives over profit margins? I want you to comment below. Do you think maritime companies should face criminal charges when their negligence causes deaths? Should executives go to jail? Should there be mandatory inspections before transoceanic voyages? What changes would you make to prevent another Bourbon Rhode? Because until we demand change, until we hold companies accountable, until we make it more expensive to ignore safety than to maintain it, this is going to keep happening. Here's what keeps me up at night. The Bourbon Rhode disaster wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern. In the years leading up to 2019, Bourbon Offshore had other incidents, other vessels with maintenance issues, The warning signs were there, but, like most maritime companies, they operated under what I call the lucky streak mentality. pushing safety margins until something breaks, then deal with the consequences. The problem is, when something breaks at sea, people die. The Bourbon Rhode story should have ended in Los Palmas shipyard. The first officer who quit should have triggered a complete safety review. The chief engineer's concerns should have halted departure. The leaking hatches identified in March should have been properly repaired before any transoceanic voyage, but each warning was ignored. Each red flag was dismissed. Each safety concern was overruled by scheduled pressure and contract obligations. And now, 11 people are dead. But here's what really terrifies me. Right now, at this very moment, there are vessels at sea with unresolved maintenance issues. There are captains being pressured to sail in unsafe conditions. There are crew members who know their vessel is UN seaworthy, but do UN have the power? The financial security to refuse to sail. The same conditions that killed 11 people aboard the Bourbon Rhode exist right now on other vessels around the world. So what can we do about it? First, awareness. That's why I'm making videos like this. That's why I need you to share this with anyone you know who works maritime jobs, who has family in the offshore industry, or who simply cares about worker safety. Second, pressure. Maritime companies respond to public pressure and regulatory pressure. If enough people demand accountability, demand better inspections, demand criminal charges for negligence, eventually change happens. Third, support for maritime workers. These men and women take dangerous jobs to support their families. They deserve vessels that are actually seaworthy. They deserve companies that prioritize their safety over profit. They deserve laws that protect them from being forced into unsafe situations. The Bourbon Rhode disaster exposed everything wrong with the maritime industry. Corporate negligence, inadequate oversight, weak enforcement, no accountability, and workers paying the ultimate price. 14 men sailed from Las Palmas on September 17, 2019. Only 3 came home. 4 families got bodies back. 7 families got nothing but uncertainty and grief. The Bourbon Rhode sits somewhere on the Atlantic Ocean floor, a metal tomb holding secrets and evidence that will never be fully recovered. 7 crew members rest somewhere in those same waters. Their final resting place unknown, but their story isn't over. Because every time someone shares this video, every time someone demands accountability, every time someone refuses to let maritime disasters be forgotten, those 11 men's deaths mean something. They become a warning, a rallying cry, a reason to fight for change. So, I'm going to ask you one more time. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to watch this video, feel sad for a moment, and then move on? Or are you going to take action? Comment below what action you're committing to. Even if it's just sharing this video with one person. Even if it's just learning more about maritime safety. Even if it's just refusing to let another Bourbon Rhode disaster happen in silence. Because that's how change starts. One person. One comment. One share. One voice demanding that human lives matter more than corporate profits. The Atlantic Ocean is vast. It's beautiful. It's deadly. And somewhere beneath those waves, 7 men from the Bourbon Rhode still rest. Never found. Never brought home. But their story on. The story of the 11 total who died is now yours to carry forward. Here's what I need from you right now. First, if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel and smash that notification bell. I'm not making feel-good maritime content. I'm exposing the disasters that companies want buried. I'm telling the stories of workers whose deaths were preventable, and I'm demanding accountability from an industry that's gotten away with negligence for too long. Next week, I'm releasing a video about a maritime disaster that makes the Bourbon Rhode look like a minor incident. A vessel with over 40 crew members. Multiple safety violations documented before departure. A company that threatened to fire anyone who refused to sail. And a tragedy so massive that 3 countries tried to cover it up. That video drops Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Set your reminder right now, because YouTube might try to suppress it. This kind of content makes powerful people nervous. Second, share this video. Not because it helps my channel Taugitois, but because somewhere out there, someone is being pressured to work on an unsafe vessel right now. Someone is being told that their safety concerns don't matter. Someone is making the same impossible choice that the Bourbon Rhode crew faced. If this video reaches that person, if it gives them the courage to refuse an unsafe job. If it saves even one life, then the Bourbon Rhode crew's deaths will have meant something. Third, I want you to go to the description of this video right now. I've put together a list of maritime worker advocacy organizations, safety reform groups, and legal resources for families affected by maritime disasters. If you've lost someone at sea, you're not alone. If you work maritime and you're facing unsafe conditions, there are people who will help you. If you want to support reform, there are organizations fighting for change. Check those links. Support those causes. Be part of the solution. Fourth, leave a comment answering this question. If you were on the Bourbon Rhode's crew and you knew the vessel wasn't safe, but your family needed your paycheck and the company was pressuring you to sell, what would you have done? Would you have refused and lost your job? Would you have sailed and hoped for the best? Would you have reported the company and risked being blacklisted in the industry? Primera, hua, ente, tono. Because understanding the impossible choices maritime workers face is the first step toward changing the system that forces them to make those choices. Fifth, if you work in maritime industries, or if you have family who does, I need you to pay attention to this next part. Personal locator beacons, PLBs. They're small devices that broadcast your GPS coordinates when activated. If the Bourbon Rhode crew had been wearing PLBs, rescue teams would have known exactly where to look. Those 7 missing crew members might have been found. These devices cost around $300. That's Italiano. $300 could be the difference between life and death. Demand that your company provides them. If they won't, buy your own. Your life is worth $300. Your family deserves to get you back if something goes wrong. Now, let me tell you what's coming next on this channel. I mentioned the 40+ crew disaster. That's next Tuesday. But I'm also working on a series that asks when to shake the maritime industry to its core. I am investigating 5 major maritime disasters from the last decade where official reports blamed human error or adverse weather conditions, but where families and whistleblowers say corporate negligence was the real cause. I'm talking to survivors. I'm reviewing investigation documents. I'm connecting patterns that regulators either missed or deliberately ignored. And I'm going to expose every single one of them. This is going to make companies angry. This is going to make regulators defensive. This is going to make some very powerful people very uncomfortable, which is exactly why you need to be subscribed and have notifications turned on. Because if this content gets suppressed or restricted, you'll still get notified when new videos drop. Here's my final question for you. The Bourbon Rhode sank on September 26, 2019. 11 people died because a company chose profit over safety. It's been over 5 years. Has anything really changed? Are vessels being better maintained? Are companies being held more accountable? Are maritime workers safer today than they were when the Bourbon Rhode went down? I don't think so. And until we force change, until we demand accountability, until we make it clear that human lives matter more than contract deadlines and profit, margins disasters like the Bourbon Rhode will keep happening. So what's it going to be? Are you going to scroll past this video and forget about it? Or are you going to be part of the change? Comment, share, subscribe, take action. Because somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, 7 crew members from the Bourbon Rhode are waiting for justice. And the only way they're going to get it is if people like you refuse to let their story be forgotten. I'll see you next Tuesday. Don't be late. The truth waits for no one. And remember, the ocean keeps its secrets, but we don't have to. Subscribe for maritime mysteries and worker justice. Next video, 3 p.m. The ship that killed 40. Why 3 countries tried to hide the truth.